Thoughtful readers of the Bible know this amazing fact about the Bible's creation story in Genesis chapter 1. It is not the only creation story in the Bible. It is one of many, multiple tellings and retellings of God's creative act, which is, of course, foundational to at least a Christian belief. I mean, go back to the creeds, the Apostles' Creed. I believe in God, the Father Almighty, creator of heaven and earth. This is one of the fundamental affirmations. How that creation occurs, though, is narrated multiply, mysteriously, and apparently cannot be contained by just one kind of story. Nor do I think we can easily say that all of these stories are just different ways of saying the same thing. They're definitely not. And as an example of that, I want to point your attention to two creation stories of a very different kind in the book of Psalms. The first one comes in Psalm 104. And Psalm 104 is a magnificent psalm. Some scholars think it might be modeled on an older traditional Egyptian hymn called the Hymn to Aten. And I'll put a link to that down below, and you can kind of follow up on what some people have tried to say about that linkage and so on. But Psalm 104 really, in a lot of ways, is a kind of a parallel, not identical, but a kind of a parallel to Genesis 1 in that it is of the peaceful creation type. So this is one of the types of creation stories, if we were to kind of group them in two types, the peaceful type of creation story. I'll read pieces of Psalm 104. I'm reading from the Jewish Study Bible, the NJPS translation. Psalm 104, "Bless the Lord, O my soul. O Lord my God, you are very great. You are clothed in glory and majesty, wrapped in a robe of light. You spread the heavens like a tent cloth. He sets rafters of his lofts in the waters, makes the clouds his chariot, moves on the wings of the wind." Verse 5, "He established the earth on its foundations so that it shall never totter. You made the deep cover it as a garment. The waters stood above the mountains." So very peaceful. There's no opposition to God's creative acts here. God is just making things happen. Doesn't even really say how, just that it happens. Skipping to later in the Psalm, verse 19, "He made the moon to mark the seasons. The sun knows where to set." Paralleling Genesis 1 there, sun and moon. "You bring on darkness, and it is night when all the beasts of the forest stir." So beautiful. Verse 24, "How many other things you have made, O Lord? You have made them all with wisdom. The earth is full of your creations." There we see the connection of wisdom to the creation event that we also see in the book of Proverbs, in the famous wisdom poem there, where wisdom is at creation along with God. Verse 25, "There is the sea." The sea, a symbol potentially of chaos, of mystery, of darkness. The sea where the monsters roam and play, something that could, in a different kind of creation story, come to oppose God. But what happens here to the sea? "There is the sea, vast and wide, with its creatures beyond number, living things small and great. There go the ships and Leviathan that you formed to sport with. All of them look to you to give them their food when it is due." So the sea here, not a threat to God, contains a creature called Leviathan, in this translation with a capital L, Leviathan in Hebrew. Apparently some kind of sea monster. Let's just bypass the discussion, maybe for another video, on what Leviathan is, if it's some kind of creature that we know today, like a whale or something like that, or if it's something more mythological or some kind of dinosaur or something like that. I'll just skip that for now, except to say, note the role of Leviathan. Leviathan is just there. Why? In this translation, "you formed to sport with," to play with it. In other words, Leviathan here in Psalm 104 is God's plaything. An animal just like these other animals that sports about in this great and wide sea in a beautiful and harmonious creation. That's one type of creation story in the Psalms. Let's turn, though, to the other. This other type of creation story is not alone in the Psalms. You can find it elsewhere. I'll put a few links to it below. But this type of creation psalm, this type of creation story is violent. And it seems to reflect a creation story type that is most famously known in the ancient Near Eastern world from a Babylonian creation story, which might date to around the year 1000 BCE, not really clear, called the Enuma Elish, in which the creation act is certainly not something that occurs by speech and something that is certainly not peaceful, but rather it involves the cracking of skulls, the splitting open of the bodies of a dead god, the body of a dead god in that story named Kingu, and the creation of the cosmos from the split apart body of the dead god. So very violent indeed. Tiamat herself is of course, I should say actually, humans are created in the Enuma Elish from the blood of Kingu. And the cosmos itself is made from Tiamat, which is a word that probably just means like the sea, the saltwater sea. Her body is split open like a fish in that Babylonian creation story. Half of her creates the sky and half the earth. I'll put a link to that down below if you want to read the Enuma Elish. If you've never read it before, it's really worth reading as a creation story to compare with the Bible's creation stories. But listen, O ye listeners, to Psalm 74 in the language we find here. Psalm 74, a maskil of Asaph. Why, O God, do you forever reject us? Do you fume in anger at the flock that you tend? Remember the community you made yours long ago, your very own tribe that you redeemed, Mount Zion, where you dwell. So right away, what do we notice? This is a psalm of exile. Why do you reject us? Verse 7, they, the Babylonians, made your sanctuary go up in flames. They brought low in dishonor the dwelling place of your presence. Verse 9, no signs appear for us. There's no longer any prophet. No one among us knows for how long. So the setting here very clearly something in the aftermath of 586 BCE, when the temple has been destroyed. The people are living in shame. This psalm begins as a lament. How long, O Lord? Okay, but the psalm takes a turn in verse 12 here in this translation. Might be numbered differently in other the verses. Maybe this one follows the Hebrew, I'm not sure. Sometimes the Psalms actually have different verse numbers in English translation than they do in the Hebrew Bible in the versions. But at any rate, verse 12 here, we get now the shift. Same psalm. O God, my king from of old, invoking the idea of God as king, who brings deliverance throughout the land. It was you who drove back the sea with your might. The sea now must be driven back. Who smashed the heads of the monsters in the waters. It was you who crushed the heads of Leviathan, who left him as food for the denizens of the desert. It was you who released springs and torrents, who made mighty rivers run dry. The day is yours, the night also, day and night, that creation imagery. It was you who set in place the orb of the sun. You fixed the boundaries of the earth. Summer and winter, you made them. So do you notice the progression here? Violent battle with Leviathan and the monsters in the waters. Here the sea being associated with chaos and creatures who have multiple heads apparently, and who must have those heads cracked and who must be defeated. Then after that violent battle, creation can actually occur. Whereas in the Genesis 1 tradition and in the Psalm 104 tradition, there is no battle, there is no opposition. Here there is opposition, and God must defeat these monsters in order to create the world. Both of these stories have power in different ways, for sure. And one could see why the authors of Psalm 74, in that position of helplessness, might feel that need to appeal to the violent imagery of the Leviathan head-cracking creation story in a situation of helplessness, in a situation of exile. I want to show you one more thing before I leave here, which is a new publication by one of my favorite scholars, Christoph Uhlinger, of the University of Zurich, Switzerland. Really just great for iconographic references, visual references from the ancient world that shine light upon biblical texts. This was published in the journal Near Eastern Archaeology in the year 2024. I'll put a link to it down below. Mastering the Seven-Headed Serpent, a stamp seal from Hatzor, provides a missing link between cuneiform and biblical mythology. This is a stamp seal image. So something kind of on stone or something hard that you press onto clay and then it leaves the image behind. And this was found at Hatzor in 2022. And it's maybe from the 800s BCE or something like that. Have a look at this image. Oh, it's so beautiful. So there's the actual stamp seal, like when you press it. But here's a drawing of it that maybe gets to show you the characters a little bit more clearly. Notice you have the warrior figure with the very common raised hand pose. Notice we have our snake here, reference to the popular Seraphim video with the wings. So for those of you who watch that or are following that, there he is again. Okay, he accompanies the warrior, accompanies the king into battle. It's very common. I wasn't just making that up. Okay, but notice what he's actually fighting. So the snake is on the warrior's side, I presume. But look whom he's fighting here. He's fighting a multi-headed snake. So back to Psalm 74, just to notice the reference here, and that really is in Hebrew, verse 14. It was you who crushed not just the head of Leviathan, the heads in the plural of Leviathan. How many heads does he have? Well, this one has 7 heads. And in many mythological references, and even in Greek mythology, you can find this idea of the many-headed monster. So not just one head. 2 types of creation in the Psalms. Apparently there's a place for this violent story as well in the heart of creation belief for Bible readers.